In 1820, the object of Moses Austin's desire occupied an expansive 360,000 square miles of northern Mexican territory and was called Tejas by a token population of just 3,500 brave souls. Most were ranchers and farmers clustered in villages near the original Spanish missions of Goliad, Gonzales, and San Antonio de Bexar, the Alamo.
After securing permission from the Spanish authorities to bring in 300 families to Texas, Moses Austin traveled back to the United States, but he had problems on the way. By the time he arrived back in Louisiana, he had fallen severely ill from bad food and water and exposure, and he only lived a few more weeks upon arriving back in the United States.
When his father, on his deathbed, asked Stephen to take over his Texas enterprise, although this isn't really something Stephen has planned to do, it isn't even really something that Stephen is interested in. It never occurs to him to let down his father. It never occurs to him to not do something that might help the family financially, so he takes up his father's mantle and comes to Texas.
All the timber and underbrush of a tropical climate, cedar, cypress, and the like, rival one another in rank growth. From among them is wafted the fragrance of the blossoms of the magnificent magnolia, which I have seen nowhere in such splendor and profusion. Gustav Dressel, German immigrant.
In 1821, when Stephen F. Austin rode into Texas for the first time, he would have entered across the Louisiana frontier, come into Nacogdoches first in the piney woods of East Texas, and there found a very polyglot population of Frenchmen, some Hispanics, some Americans, a mixture of people living on the edges of Louisiana. And that's a place his father would have encountered too.
Stephen Austin, when he came to Texas, he came as an impresario. The term impresario was one which the Mexican government used based on the Spanish culture, and it was one in which a man was expected to bring the colonists, pay for their way, to establish the town, to be the government, to establish the land grants for the individual settlers, and this is one of the things that Stephen Austin was required to do.
Austin's charter from the Mexican government gave him the right to settle 300 families in his grant. He already had 100 who were interested before he ever went to Mexico. And through advertisements in Western newspapers, he soon had many more. And it wasn't long before his grant was fulfilled. And 300 families, the old 300 they were called, soon settled in Austin's colony. These became the founding families of Anglo, Texas.
Austin established his headquarters and the capital of his colony on a high bluff along the Brazos River at a place called San Felipe de Austin. It was never more than a ramshackle collection of log houses with a couple of inns and taverns, a land office.
Many of these Austin colonists adopted a term for themselves, Texian, and this term is an interesting hybrid denoting that these people are no longer entirely American, but neither are they entirely Mexican. They're somewhere in between, Texian.
Along the Brazos River is a most beautiful situation for a town or settlement. The country back of this place for about 15 miles is as good in every respect as a man could wish for. Land all first rate, plenty of timber, fine water. Stephen Austin, 1821.
Austin's urban namesake, San Felipe de Austin, was hardly imposing, hardly keeping with the myth of the great land speculating impresario. It was a little dirt town, a scattering of log cabins, a few trees cut down with the stumps still standing, and the capital of Austin's colony.
The land opportunities in Texas were fantastic. You could get in Texas more than 4,000 acres of land for less than $100 in fees and charges. Land in the United States cost $1.25 an acre. They were family people. They set up first subsistence farms, They tended as quickly as they could toward getting into cash crop production.
In a place like San Felipe, the first thing that was planted was corn. Further south, they would have gone for sugarcane, and certainly in time, cotton. Cotton was the cash crop.
But along with cotton, the Texians brought their inhumane and callous institution, slavery.
In Texas, to grow cotton in any significant quantities, slave labor was necessary. The reason for that was cotton needed a lot of labor, particularly at picking time. With land so cheap, there was no free labor to be hired.
Cotton culture was booming, and with the growth of this cash crop, Texas became a magnet for Anglo-American settlers.
Mexican officials are at first delighted that so many of these Anglo-Celtic Texians come to Texas to settle. But then they keep coming and coming and coming. And by 1829, they're beginning to wonder how they're going to stop, how the presence of these Americans is going to affect the complexion of Texas.